At the end of my The Last of Us recap, I said that while Joel's death was brutal and a huge loss, it had to come early because his end is also the beginning of the new story. The one we're expecting the show to tell in the rest of this season and its third, which it's already been renewed for. Through his fateful decision to save Ellie at the end of the first season, Joel forced us to think about the concept of justice. Is that what he achieved by killing the Fireflies, or was he just reacting based on his fear of losing the thing that helped him regain some of his humanity after losing his daughter 20 years earlier? It's not a question that has an easy answer, that's the point. And the first season is so much about survival that no character makes it out without compromising their morals. It's just how the world is in a post-cordyceps reality. The second season introduces the idea that justice is in the eye of the beholder. Abby doesn't care about how well you can make your case that Joel did the right thing or that it was understandable given the circumstances. He killed her father, someone she sees as an innocent, and so she decides to deliver what she believes is justice. Episode 3 uses the council meeting to highlight the subjective nature of justice and when it's necessary. A new character named Carlisle argues against grudges and revenge, saying what separates the citizens of Jackson from the raiders and murderers is their capacity for mercy. This shows a monumental difference in the two seasons because killing is as black and white as it could be when it's only about survival. In the season 2 premiere, we started to see how Jackson symbolized a shift of focus to making a future. And in that, you begin accumulating things you can lose. In that situation, is eye for eye justice the most important thing? Seth, a character that we sort of got off on the wrong foot with since he's a grumpy bigot, would argue yes. And he makes a fairly good case for it. I'm not sure it holds up whenever you can see the whole picture, but I think you could say he's not wrong in worrying that the wolves might return if they do nothing. I think what his speech does more than anything is make Ellie look reasonable when she delivers her plea for what, in her words, is not revenge. What she wants is what Jackson used to give people. She wants justice. Ellie's loss is real to us. When she wakes up in the hospital on the day Joel died, we know what she's screaming about. In the scene right before that, we see Tommy go to his brother's body while fires are still burning in the street. When he sees Joel's watch, which symbolizes how time stopped for him when Sarah died, you understand that he recognizes the significance when he says, "Give Sarah my love." We know Sarah had the watch repaired for him on his birthday. And then later when she gets shot when they're trying to escape, it gets broken. Joel continued to wear the watch as a reminder of his daughter and his loss, and it serves as a symbol of his survivor's guilt. This is something that he had in common with Ellie, who lost Riley after they were bitten, and just as the watch will pass on, his survivor's guilt passes on to his brother and adds to Ellie's. That's what she's dealing with when she wakes up in the hospital. And as Gail will point out later when she's talking to Tommy, for Ellie this is even more complicated because she lost the only person she could be truthful with. After a time jump, we find out that the kick to the ribs Manny delivered on his way out of the lodge kept Ellie laid up in the hospital for 3 months. Was that justice? She did slash his hand with her knife. After she tells the doctor her pain level is a 0 out of 10 and she passes a pulmonary function test with flying colors, she finds out she has to talk to Gail before she can leave. As you'd expect, she's anxious to get out of there and doesn't do herself any favors during the assessment. She mocks the idea that she would need counseling and is obvious about just saying what she thinks Gail would want to hear. She starts with some kernels of truth, things like Joel meant a lot to her and she misses him, but when Gail turns the conversation to New Year's Eve, it's harder to believe her. She says her outburst on the dance floor was the last time they talked. And she even brings up seeing him on the porch and her regret about not talking to him. There's a subtle shift in the performance here, but you can't say she's lying for sure until Gail puts her on the spot about the last thing Joel said to her. Confronted with the idea that Joel felt he had wronged her by saving her, she sort of has to lie. Gail knows that's what's happening, but there isn't much she can do if Ellie won't be honest. There's an interesting exchange in the middle of this, where Ellie says your final moment with someone doesn't define your whole time with them. Gail's response that it shouldn't but often does makes you think about how difficult loss can be, and you see this on Ellie's face as the mask starts to slip, as she's about to return to a real world without the person who used to make her feel safe. It makes the distance between them that we saw in the first episode much more unsettling. Just like Gail, we know we're missing something. Ellie was doing the teenage thing of trying to figure out who she was as a young adult who didn't need protecting. But she was also mad about something. Plus, she told Jesse that she wanted to go out on patrol with Joel the morning he died. And while she evaded his question about if they patched things up, this was a complete 180 from where she was when she walked past him on the porch. The other detail that comes to mind is that the opening shot from that morning, when Jesse was banging on her door to get her ready for patrol, shows her guitar that Joel was playing when she passed him sitting inside her room. For now, there isn't anyone for her to tell the truth to, which adds some weight to the scene when she returns home to the empty house. There are flowers out front and in the mailbox, and the fact that they've been there for a while makes you think about how she missed out on the collective grieving to a certain extent. Inside, she looks at her old room and his workshop with all the unfinished projects, and then finds a box on his bed with his watch and revolver. This sequence is pulled straight from the game, and when she looked at the watch in that, it made me wonder because obviously the watch meant a lot to Joel. I've already mentioned that. That makes it matter to us, but other than pointing out that it was broken in one of their first encounters, it's not something they ever talk about on screen. When I went looking, I couldn't find anything confirming she knows the real story behind it. It's interesting to think about what these two things represent, and how the implicit violence associated with the gun is more in tune with where her head is, and how that makes it easier to process. She's kept it together to this point, but she does break down when she walks over to look at some of his clothes. It's heart-wrenching to see her start crying as she smells them, and it's so brief, it barely lasts 30 seconds because she forces herself to stop when Dina walks in and calls to her from downstairs. She's actually smiling by the time she sits down at the table. There are cookies involved as a peace offering. Dina knows Ellie will be angry when she finds out she lied about knowing things about Abby and her crew. She points out that she loved Joel too, which we saw in the season premiere, but establishes herself as the one thinking more clearly. She tells Ellie their names and sketches the WLF patch she saw on Mel's backpack. Eugene told her about different groups trying to fight Fedra in the Northwest and how stupid it was that they weren't working together. One of the groups was the Washington Liberation Front, and from their initials, WLF, you get the Wolves. Because she was waiting to tell Ellie first, no one else knows about any of this. So when they leave, they go straight to Tommy. But Ellie isn't interested in hearing that he has to think about it. She says if it had been Tommy, Joel would have been halfway to Seattle before the sun came up. Tommy makes an important distinction. Joel would have gone if it had been to save his life. But he wasn't like that when they lost people. That would just break him like it was his fault. So according to him, Joel wasn't about vengeance, and he saw that repeatedly. He gets upset and tells Ellie not to talk to him like he doesn't know Joel, reminding her he's his brother. This sticks with you because when you're dealing with grief, there's so much second guessing. What if you hadn't said that thing? What if you had only done something different? What if you missed something? What if you didn't know them as well as you thought you did? It's fascinating to see the two people who know Joel best disagree about what he would do or want them to do, and how their choices are affected. As this episode develops, you see how clouded Ellie's judgment is, and don't really care because of what happened to Joel, and more importantly, how it happened. Tommy tells them that if they want to put together a posse, they have to do it the right way and take it to the council for a vote. He does say he'll back her when she asks, as opposed to Jesse, who just says they aren't supposed to discuss upcoming votes when she asks him. They're together for a quick training session that shows us she could do enough training at the hospital that she hasn't really lost a step. He won't tell her how he'll vote, but he does give her the sound advice to write her thoughts down ahead of time because right now she's angry, and no one will vote for that. I've already touched on the meeting itself, but there's a mother there who lost her sister who voices concern about sending 16 of their best away while they're still vulnerable. As far as playing the part of trying to tell people what they want to hear to get what she wants, Ellie does a pretty good job. Her awkwardness almost makes it feel honest in a weird way, even if it's not. The idea about it not being about revenge is obviously bullshit, but she at least believes she's telling the truth about wanting justice. Her bit about strangers is pretty good good, and it's a smart move to talk about how the thing that keeps the place together is that they can count on each other. But her rallying point that it's not for her or even Joel, that they need to do it for us, isn't enough to sway the council. She is the last one to talk, and after she finishes, the vote to send 16 people to find and execute Joel's killers loses 8 votes to 3. Jesse looks disappointed and Tommy looks pissed. He goes to have that conversation with Gail, who's having some beers at a Pee-wee baseball game. Her role is turning out to be more significant than I would have guessed from her introduction in the first episode. Her husband Eugene has been mentioned in every episode so far, and it feels like there must be more to his story. Her pointed questions to Joel and now Ellie show that she has an agenda. When Joel entered her house for his therapy session, they showed us that Eugene's boots were still sitting by her door, a sign that his death was somewhat recent. When asked about all the extra stress of having to see so many patients after the battle, she says she's pretty much a disaster because she's been coping through alcoholism and smoking as much weed as possible. Because of this and her personality, most of her scenes play like their primary function is to lighten the mood, which is good because you need that in a story that isn't afraid to kill off its main characters. But as Ellie gets back on the road, Gail and Tommy can also keep Jackson in the story. You're locked into the character you're playing in the games, so when Ellie leaves, it cuts you off from Jackson, which kind of squanders some of the strengths of the TV show format. Gail also brings a unique point of view as the only psychotherapist in the post-apocalypse. After listening to Tommy's concerns about wanting to keep Ellie from going down the dark path Joel went down, she tells him that nurture is only a small part of it. The rest is nature. She essentially says that their dark tendencies are probably what drew them together. And in her opinion, as someone who's worked as a therapist for 40 years, some people just can't be saved. This and her insistence that Ellie is a liar, not someone who's telling lies, but someone who is a liar, is huge in a story based on a game that did so much with POV. This ties into the subjectivity of justice and the emerging cycle of violence that Season 2 is exploring. Joel killed Abby's dad because he was going to kill Ellie. Abby responded in kind, and now that the vote didn't go her way, Ellie is getting every gun she can get her hands on together to ride off to Seattle by herself. I like that she's talking to Tommy about all of this after we've watched him being a leader all season. Remember, when Joel was telling Ellie about him, he described him as a joiner who followed pipe dreams and went as far as saying he was delusional. Part of this was Joel's need to try to save everyone, something that ultimately bit him whenever he stumbled on Abby getting chased by the infected. Still, while doing my trailer breakdown, I went back to rewatch the first episode of the series for the scenes about Joel's watch, and was almost surprised to be reminded of Tommy getting arrested for getting into a bar fight and saying it wasn't my fault this time. His transformation is rooted in having something to lose. And most of the rest of the episode shows us that Ellie is missing that at this point in the story. After she fails to get the community behind her, she decides to take the matter of delivering justice into her own hands. Maybe she's not completely without someone to lose. Dina surprises her by joining her rather than trying to talk her out of riding off to Seattle, thus reinforcing again that she's quite better at thinking things through and planning accordingly. After she gets Ellie up to speed on the plan that sounds like it might work, there's a great short exchange where Dina tells her she just could have asked. And Ellie admits that hadn't occurred to her. I'm kind of with her too, because after the kiss, I was expecting a relationship to develop. But even though a lot was going on when she got out of the hospital, it still felt like they reverted to just being friends. Dina presents her willingness to help kill Abby from that angle, and something she wants to do because of her love for Joel, not because of her feelings for Ellie. They meet at the gate to leave, and Ellie learns that Seth has been instrumental in putting everything together. There's a great beat here where he offers to trade her a much better long gun than the one she has. She doesn't want to do it because she hates the guy, but eventually does because she realizes she needs it. This and when she comes around to shake his hand when he sends them off mark how the story shifts back to focusing on survival and moral compromise as they pass through the gate. During the following travel montage, Dina asks about the first person Ellie killed. She won't tell her about Riley because she says it's too messed up, but she tells her about the kid in Kansas City instead. Dina's reaction of feeling sorry for her surprises Ellie, because she is the killer in the story. Dina says she's disloyal like that, and this is important because even if the will they won't they aspect of this doesn't play out, she will need someone in her life who genuinely has her back. The Curtis and Viper references are another way to drive this home. Remember, those are Joel's favorite 80s action movies. There were 4 of them, and in the show, Sarah borrowed part 2 from the neighbor to watch with him on the night of his birthday. It keeps coming up in the show and the games, and Viper, being a young kid in the first one, parallels Joel and Ellie's story. Based on the season 2 promo materials, we're expecting a lot of flashbacks to keep Pedro Pascal around, but beyond his body making an appearance in the opening scene, his presence in the episode is defined by his absence. So these references that reward you for paying attention to details really add to the experience. There is quite a bit of will they won't they energy though. It's evident Ellie's feelings haven't changed, and there are several times when Dina seems to be playing into it. To stay on the Curtis and Viper train, one example that stands out is when she thinks she picks up on a movie reference, and when Ellie explains she was just trying to be a badass, Dina tells her she doesn't have to try. The scene in the tent, where despite the clear sky she realizes a storm is coming, pretty well sums up where things are between them. Ellie is the one who you can see is having feelings until Dina brings up the kiss. Ellie tries to play it off as not meaning much, while Dina plays it as, hey, I just want to know how good I am at kissing a girl since you're gay and I'm not. The 6 out of 10 rating says so much since we watched it happen and saw the chemistry and know how this could go. A sequence introduces a new group from the area to prime us for the Seattle chapters. They all have the same self-inflicted scars on their cheeks, and they communicate through whistling. We meet a father teaching his young daughter to interpret the messages. They seem nice. They're on the move to get away from war, so they're peaceful. The daughter asks why the prophet can't keep them safe, so religious. He tells her that a prophet isn't magic, and they keep her spirit alive by following her words and obeying her teachers, but they keep themselves safe. So grounded? In that spirit, she asks for a hammer, which he gives her. She looks so cute saying she feels safer that it immediately feels like something bad will happen. Just after he tells her that distance will keep her far safer than any hammer, the lookout sounds a warning whistle. They take cover and she worries that they're being attacked by infected, which she calls demons, but he tells her it's wolves, which we know is the WLF. Sometime later, as they're approaching the city, Dina and Ellie find their bodies, revealing a complete massacre that includes the little girl who you can see holding her hammer. Dina gets sick and makes a point that it's never happened before around dead bodies. This whole situation is a bit perplexing. The father made the point of saying it was wolves. That's the implication. The first guy was shot while running away, and we saw that this group was presented as peaceful refugees running away from war. Ellie and Dina assume it was Abby's group, and we understand why they would. But we also know that they said they had a code of not killing people who couldn't defend themselves. Ellie and Dina wouldn't be alive if that weren't the case. The presence of kids underlines this as an atrocity, and it's more fuel for the fire of Ellie and Dina feeling justified in their pursuit of justice. But you wonder how much of this situation you should take at face value. This happens 9 miles outside of Seattle, and they continue until they can see downtown. Ellie says it's pretty, and it is. It actually looks pretty great. And Dina remarks that no one is shooting at them, so there must not be many wolves left. They've keyed in on this detail every chance they get, starting from Eugene's description, which they probably should have thought about being outdated. Otherwise, they were pretty easily convinced that because they hadn't heard of the wolves, then they must not be that significant. When it cuts to the guy who kicked her in the ribs at the lodge, Manny, it becomes apparent to us that they're probably in for a big surprise. He's working as a lookout in a high-rise and gets a call to check out a section of the city. They use military terms in their communication, instructions, mentioning that they're advancing to the FOB, which stands for Forward Operating Base. When he gives them the all clear, we see that they're not just decked out with advanced gear and moving as a unit, but they also have full-on military vehicles at their disposal. How much of the first season was just about them trying to get a battery for one car? It made me think of the scene where Dina asked if Ellie would use Joel's revolver to kill Abby. She understood the sentiment, but tells her to pick something else as her daily driver because the revolver is slow and kicks like hell, which is something you pick up right away when you try to shoot infected with that thing in the game before you boost up with supplements. In the end, they came prepared, much better than she would have been if Ellie would have came by herself. But how far does that go if you're up against an army? The show did a good job of transitioning us through the aftermath of losing Joel and showing us why these two characters believe they're doing what's right by coming to Seattle. The performances also added enough to show us why they might think they still have a chance to get to Abby, even when they find out what they're up against. The graveyard scene is also a fitting tribute to Joel's character. On the way, they stop at the graveyard, which is 10 miles outside of town, which I presume is that far out to help Jackson stay relatively hidden. Ellie leaves some coffee beans on his grave. His love of coffee is referenced throughout the games and the show, and it serves as a comfort that connects him to his life before the outbreak. When Ellie puts her hand on the ground, and Bella Ramsey does some great work showing how that affects her, it makes you think about how his life was always divided by before and after the outbreak, while hers will be divided by when he was alive and after he died. That kicks like hell, and it's a great way to say goodbye to the character, and I think that is a great place to leave things. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.